Is a municipal audit committee of, not the whole, let's see, we're noticed today from 11 a.m. till 12 p.m. We'll go ahead and start with member updates, or member introductions, rather.
Mark Littlefield.
Scott Myers. Get you a microphone so the people on the phone can hear you.
So Philip Bryce, CFO.
Stephanie Ryan, Controller.
Kelly Mays, BDO.
Thank you. Do we have any members on the phone?
Joy Mariner from BDO is on the phone.
Thank you, Joy. We'll go ahead and have BDO give their update.
Awesome. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I have Kelly Mays there. She's the senior manager on your audit. And I'll be honest, this update is mostly from her because she is the one who's, I think, only knee deep at this point, maybe not neck deep in the audit process, but things are going really well so far. The one thing that she's not kind of daily involved in is the single audit. We've been getting various things from Stephanie to move the single audit forward, and we have a team in Seattle who's working on the first 5 major programs, which are the ones that we knew would need to be audited from last year, with the exception of FEMA, which will also need to be audited, but we don't have the FEMA recs totally ready to start auditing them. So those programs are in process. We also are, from our planning, we call planning the procedures we do to determine what risks we need to address, determine how we're going to go ahead and audit certain balances. Our planning procedures are really largely done overall, except we still have a few things that we're waiting on in order to finish our testing on the SAP IT system. So because you place such reliance on SAP, that's something that we, do look into the way that the controls are set up in the system for who has access to it, who has the user rights, and what can they do in the system. One thing I'll just let you all know, and I think it was added to this week's audit committee update as well. One thing that we found already is, and we actually found it towards the end of 2022 as well, but there does appear that now in the SAP system, people have the ability to enter and post their own journal entries in the system without review. So it seems to be kind of a new thing for 2023, largely didn't happen in 22. So we will be evaluating that, and something that we would recommend you go back to the old way where one person entered and somebody else reviewed. So that's something we're evaluating as well. And then otherwise, we already started diving into testing various things, including, the cash, bank reconciliations, some investments, and, some of the information that we've received from Controller Division in those areas. We're done with testing on Civic, so I'll be finishing up my reviews and plan to issue that as soon as we can. And then we started, pretty solidly on AWU. I think we're working through cash investments at AWU, started capital assets today. So it's exciting to be, getting through a bunch of stuff over on AWU. They gave us to seek revenue details and a lot of other information as well. So otherwise, we got an updated draft on Civic on Monday. So hopefully we can get through completion of that file and issue. I will just say I have I have a medical leave next Wednesday, starting November 20th and through December. It's supposed to be December 11th, but I'm hoping I can work remotely the week of December 4th. So just with that upcoming, we'll try to get Civic out by next week, but realistically, it's probably going to happen the first week of December simply because of my absence. Otherwise, I think, the only thing I'll ever mention is I believe period 14 got closed. Is that right? So that's an exciting thing for us. Yeah, great. So period 14 was closed now. And so I think just in the last couple of days. So that means we're going to start getting trial balances and a lot of more information. We are, I think, prioritizing requests related to grants. but having those, having the trial balances means that we can move forward with actually testing balances and tying them out. So auditors love trial balances. And the controller division is also working through, getting the grants finalized, and some of our control documentation this week and next week will also get finalized. So I'm going to pause there. Kelly, anything else in particular you wanted to highlight for the committee?
No, ma'am, I think that covers it.
Okay. I think that's my update, Mr. Chair, so I appreciate you giving us a chance to give you an update.
Thank you. Any member questions? Okay, we'll move on to new business. P-card manual language, and I don't know who's tackling that one.
And BDO, you are free to leave now, if you would like.
Is there anybody on the phone?
Well, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Alden Thurn, Director of Internal Audit. I think we did the P-card review, and the audit has been finalized and sent out. It is an annual review, which is basically of the purchasing department. I will try to anticipate the question. Matthew gave a highlight of one of the sections that was there, which has to really kind of do with split purchases. So I can kind of give a little bit of a history on that and a little bit of information. I don't know if you were the gentleman who had that specific question, but it is one that comes up. The P-card audit is an annual audit that's in code that's required for the Internal Audit Department to take a look at. There's a lot of policy and procedure. I will say the policy and procedure is not necessarily the most current. It wouldn't be a bad idea to have some of those policies and procedures updated. One of them hasn't been updated, I think it's since 2009, which is the ineligible purchases. And then the other one I think was around between 2017 and 2019. I have it here, but I'm not going to go look there. But it's more recent, but it's still relatively old. Why is that important? It's important because we have lots of P-card users out there, and we have a tremendous amount of turnover amongst employees across the municipality of Anchorage. And while the purchasing department does have a training program, there's with that turnover and with the specific details that are required when you give somebody a credit card and you can say, here it is, go use it. I think we did close to 40,000 P-card transactions, give or take. So it's a lot. It's not unexpected that people are going to make purchases that they should not, either because of the code or in a variety of different methods. So that's why the internal audit does look at that. I know they give suggestions, and I would hope that moving forward, maybe those suggestions could actually be implemented by the administration a little bit more aggressively, just to try to really flesh it out there. That's in the training area. That's in the updating of policies and procedures to be able to know that. But historically, and I'm giving a little bit more information to you too, maybe than you would like, but historically, some of the concerns we have a lot of questions about people who purchase things for their office or for their kitchens in their offices. We get refrigerators, and you remember we have a lot of fire stations that have kitchens and those kind of things. And there are some people who buy a variety of heaters and chairs and those kind of things for their work offices. And it gets into a situation of are those purchases, one, warranted, and two, are they the best use of public funds when you buy a $3,000 refrigerator when you could have bought an $800 refrigerator? And you have those kind of questions. And without guidance, it's hard to be able for people to do that. That's why the audit comes on an annual basis, and the internal audit department takes a very good look at it, and they are able to do that. One of the other specific areas that does keep coming up over and over again, but when you talk about maybe 50 to 100 purchases over 40,000, doesn't really sound that much, but it's something that we take a pretty good look at, is are there situations where somebody has a P card limit? It doesn't really matter what the limit is, whether it's 1,500, 2,500, 5,000, where it looks like they needed to make a purchase that was above that credit card limit for the same thing. Some of the things that I've looked at, one entity needs batteries. Well, needing batteries is not probably something that's precluded, but they use their P card, 20 times to make a purchase. So when you add all those purchases up of batteries, it might be $40,000 worth of battery. The question is, if they had a $2,500 limit on their P card, is it acceptable to make $22,000 P card purchases where you combine, you do all those types of things. Sometimes the other thing is the bill comes in at different time periods, and you pay the first half of it on one and you pay the second half of it later, or you get another person who's in your department who has another P card, and you put half the card on your purchase and the other half on their card, or a purchase on their card. I want to say gaming it. I think a lot of times the employees are not trying to do that. What they're trying to do is meet the needs of the entity. But in certain circumstances, maybe they should have gone out for a competitive bid and if they know they were going to need, $40,000 worth of batteries, maybe they should be able to do that. So those are a variety of things. Those always come up. I think if in every since it's an annual report, you will see the same types of things happening on an ongoing basis. We get a lot of people who buy retirement gifts for different departments, and they put those on P cards, and you're trying to justify why that was a legitimate purpose. So those are quite common that come up. On the split purchases, I know that's going to be there. I don't know if we have an assembly member who currently has this particular question on one of the charges, which I'm aware of. I don't look at how the purchase was paid. I look at how the original invoice was created. If an invoice was created and it says this is going to be a $2,500 invoice, and they ask for a partial payment now and a partial payment later, and your P card limit is $1,500, I don't think that we can make the argument that the $1,400 prepayment was under your threshold and the second half of that was not. I mean, the original invoice was for more than what the P card purchase was. So I know it's room for interpretation and how all those things come, but I always try to fall back to what is the invoice, and that determines it. If an invoice is going to be more than your P card purchase, there are methodologies in the purchasing department to rectify that. What you can call up the P card administrator and say, hey, I've got a $2,500 charge that's going to happen here. My limit's $1,500. Can I have on this particular one? Can I have my credit increased? The purchasing director has the ability. They have their own P card. In certain circumstances, they might be able to buy it and so forth. So when employees, maybe do something, I think it comes down to a couple of things. Timing, hey, we needed this right now. We don't want to go through the process. But if there are processes in place, what internal audit does is not trying to determine what the intention is of the people. It's just trying to go on the facts. And if the facts say that there was an invoice for $2,500 and you paid it in 1, 2, 3, 4 different payments, if it went over your credit card limit, in our opinion, that is a split purchase. And as such, you should have done one of the other things that I mentioned earlier to be able to accomplish that. Now, can language be changed to be more specific? We in internal audit always recommending that's the case. I started this conversation about that to begin with. If the assembly or the administration believe that certain things are allowed, then change the policy and procedure to accommodate that. If it's not, internal audit is going to continue to look at what the policies and procedures that are in place at that point in time. And with our judgment, we're going to give a listing or a review of whether we feel that the policies and procedures were followed. So that's just kind of a history here. I know there's always some, but we're not blaming anybody. We're just highlighting what we feel are specific instances where the policies and procedures may not have been followed. Our preference would be that then training, or the policies and procedures be modified. And then when we review it the next time, maybe the number of exceptions will be reduced at that particular point. But what you see is a pretty historical norm. The question areas tend to always be the question areas because no one has gone in and either definitively affirm that it is ineligible or made it eligible by changing the policies and procedures. So I'll kind of stop there. I didn't leave any names or departments or anything like that in the question. I'm just trying to give the interpretation of what internal audit looks at when they're evaluating the P card audit on an annual basis.
Thank you, Mr. Thurn. Member questions? Littlefield.
Thank you, Chair. I got a couple quick questions. Has there been any recent changes to the policy and procedures for the standard checks and balances? And is purchasing understaffed where they don't catch these as they happen rather than a year later? I'm confused on how we don't catch these as they happen. I know exactly how it goes. And if you want to buy something bigger than your 25 limit, you call purchasing and purchase either approves it or you don't. So I'm just wondering if there's been a recent change that I'm not aware of.
Through the chair, member Littlefield, I think I'm pretty confident. I'll look to Scott here, but I believe the two references I made to policies, one was 2009 and one was around 2017 or 2019. I forget the things, but so I would say not recent. I will say that the prior administration purchasing department under the CFO at that point in time did make an effort to try to make their communication of policies and procedures. We did try to make some changes to that. They did send out some things that were in error. We pulled those back, changed them again to try to clear. I mean, I think it really boils down to, I think I personally think that the exceptions one, which hasn't been modified since 2009, should be changed and updated. Like I mentioned, and Scott can affirm this, there's a lot of purchases for like kitchen supplies, kitchen microwaves, even in this building, there are many kitchens that departments have, and they believe that if I've always had a microwave in this particular department and it blows up, then we'll just use a P card and go get a new one. It's really never been clearly defined whether is that the public use of money for person, their chairs, or they need a heater for their office, or their chairs, they need certain accommodations that they may think are extra. I would like to see that particular policy and procedure updated, because the one that says these are not allowed, I think it's much clearer, and it removes the ambiguity in some of these other areas that happen. And I'm pretty confident in saying we see the exact same things year after year after year. And if that's the case, then an update into that, I think would handle that. So to kind of, I think, circle back around, if I haven't asked your question, I would think that we could probably update the policies and procedures here a little bit better with some of the more recent things that have happened over the last 15 years in one, and maybe the last 6 years in another, just to clarify. I do think that the purchasing department, they were working on that, and I'm hoping they're continuing to would continue their outreach of the program from trying to help the employees who have P cards understand the rules and guidelines. I would think that they should, enhance and keep incorporating their training opportunities. Maybe we could also do a little bit better. Those all have to be approved by supervisors, and maybe the supervisors should be looking at these. I think, going back to your comment, I think it's very difficult to get these questionable items looked at before they actually purchase them. I mean, the purchasing department does not actually make that decision. It's through the internal audit department, which is really a year after the fact, where they go back and look at this particular audit was for 2023 purchases. So it's always after the fact. I think it's in a perfect world, it'd be awesome, but with that number of transactions, I mean, that was the whole purposes of P cards, was to try to speed up the purchases of small dollar items rather than going through RFP purchasing processes. We also get a rebate, so it's kind of a revenue generator a little bit in some areas, you can say, for those vendors that use that. I think it's a real challenge to do that. I think we just need to continue to focus on trying to educate our users of P cards, and also providing them clear and delineated rules And then to the best of our ability, continue to monitor that those things happen. And when they don't, continuing that education. I know that the purchasing department, under repeat abusers, so to speak, have pulled P cards from certain people. I'm not really a proponent of that because the department probably still needs that work to be done. That's a fine line to be able to walk. But based upon my experience as a P card, and obviously when I looked at every P card purchase for COVID, because that was a part of our reimbursement thing. And some of the things I saw in there were, very questionable of those type of needs. And I think it gets really difficult to do when somebody, and Scott mentioned this, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but I know IT formerly had a specific guideline on different IT purchases. If you're going to buy a keyboard, a headset, a camera, and those requirements were eliminated. So now we've got people buying, a $500 keyboard when maybe an $80 keyboard would have been the standard allowed type of equipment. So we are seeing more of those type of purchases happening, and they were listed in the report that came out, where people may have gotten qualified purchases, but did they overspend, so to speak, on some of those particular things? So it's a pretty extensive report because of the number of transactions. But I will tell you, I will bet that when we do the 2024, we'll see the exact same things coming back again. And unless we change the underlying guidance, it's hard to hold people accountable.
Okay, you'd mentioned a couple times you have suggestions that need to be implemented by the administration. You're part of the administration. So where does that implementation go to?
I'm actually not a part of the administration anymore in my new role. I kind of report to the mayor, but I really report to you guys.
Okay.
So my role is, my new role, the role I'm playing this week, is to provide recommendations and guidance and so forth. I believe the purchasing department no longer reports to the CFO, so I believe it reports to the chief administrative officer. So between the administration and purchasing, that's where that would happen. And then the policies and procedures are ultimately administered by the OMB department to be able to run through and ultimately have the mayor sign off on them. So there is a process in place. All internal audit does is use those policies and procedures to do our evaluations of our tasks that we're asked to do.
So I guess my question is, the directive, does it need to come from the assembly, or does it come from the municipal manager's office to implement your suggested changes?
Well, I believe they were made within the audit report, and I believe the response from management was management not confirms, what's the word? Concurs with the recommendations of the audit. So, like I said, the purchasing officer makes because purchasing is where P cards resides. There's a P card administrator in the purchasing office, so they're responsible for that task. So between the purchasing officer and the chief administrative officer, they would be the ones who would need to forward any changes to policies and procedures that are under their guidance through the appropriate policy and procedure process through OMB and ultimately mayor approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thurn. I don't have anything else unless there's audience participation. Mr. Farina.
And through the chair, part of this discussion is I am one of the time card approvers. I do not have a P card. And one of the questions that came up through members in this whole process is how to apply to things like our monthly cell phone bills for GCI or ACS or those types of things. Because obviously we don't know, there's no PMP that sets the window. So is it like per year, per month? How many transactions to go over? And then the second question that was proposed, bad echo. The second question that was proposed was for reservations, things like the library and those things, where the vendor requests a down payment. It's not the user initiating the split, it's the vendor initiating the split. So where does that fall in there as well? And those are the two questions that came up through the clerk's office and then through assembly members.
So a couple of items there, and Scott's given me some information. Utility payments are acceptable for P card purchases. That's in the policy and procedure. So utilities, of which cell phone would be considered one of those particular things, are fine. We do have people who who knowingly or unknowingly make split purchases. There are some very savvy people out there who can be able to do that. I would argue that it doesn't matter if the vendor does it, request the purchases to be split or not. In my example, and this is the example that we're referring to. I'm just not giving names and so forth. In the example, the original invoice was for approximately $2,600. The P card limit was $1,500. At that point in time, you should know that that amount for that invoice is over your P card limit. If the vendor says pay it in multiple payments, if I were the P card user, I would have gone to the P card administrator and ahead of time and said, listen, I've got a specific invoice from Joe Blow that's for $2,500. They're requesting it to be done in two payments, but it's one real bill. And I would ask them at that point in time to give some kind of authority or response saying that this particular purchase can be paid in such a manner. But I certainly understand the gray area on this. I mean, not everything's black and white, which is why I would try to get away from what is the intention of the P card user and try to go to what is the invoice itself. And that's what goes back to my comment on the batteries. When you're buying, you're going to buy over the course of a year $50,000 worth of batteries. You should know up front, if that's your annual thing, that you should put use purchasing's other mechanisms to make that particular purchase. And then maybe it's a task order and you already have the cheapest price, and then you're able to go and buy as many as you need at the time, and you're not using the P card to be able to do that. The reason why people use the P card is because of ease and quickness to be able to make those things accomplished. And that's not an acceptable reason for doing that. We have Title VII and purchasing guidelines that we should follow. And if you're buying one battery for the year for $500, go ahead and do it. But if you're going to buy $50,000 worth of batteries over the course of the year, you should know that up front, and you should use the purchasing mechanisms to be able to do that. Conversely, if you know a charge is going to be more than your P card limit, and that's a historical piece, whether it's your utilities, then ask for your P card limit to be increased. I mean, 5,000 is the max. If you have a 1,500 and you're historically always going up 2,500, then make the case that you need a higher. We have policies and procedures in place to be able to do this. And I would think that from an internal audit perspective, we're just saying we would like people to follow the policies and procedures, and we're auditing, did they follow the policies and procedures? And if there's not a policy and procedure in place to handle something, then we'll make a recommendation for that. But this P card situation's been out there for many, many, many years, and all of these things continue to come up, and there should be ways to address them through the normal course of business.
Thank you, Mr. Thurn. So you'd mentioned multiple times that the policies need to change because the same thing comes up year over year, audit after audit. So perhaps the administration's listening, those who need to make the changes, and we can correct that going forward. Mr. Farina, did that answer your question? Perfect. Okay. Any audience, Mr. Littlefield?
I have one more quick one, and we keep going back to an individual. I'll just say an individual wants to buy something that's $2,500, has a $1,500 P card. All it takes is a phone call. And what I'm in my past life, we used to call Beverly, and Beverly would approve it, one-time deal. Well, I don't know if we have enough people, and people are probably trying to avoid that phone call and doing exactly what you're saying, a split purchase for something. And I just think that I don't know if we have enough people up there, because this thing is ballooned, which it should. It takes care of a whole bunch of little purchases down below that need not affect the purchasing department. But I'm not sure if we have enough people manning that P card, for compliance. I don't know if it'd be easier if we had another individual to call. That's why I said, are we we have enough people? Is there vacancies up there that we're not addressing? Because I know purchasing can get very hectic at times, and this is another, a minor, minor, place for purchasing, and I just think that it needs to be looked at.
Through the chair, Miss Emily Member Littlefield, I've never heard, as long as I've been here and managed that area and so forth, that the P card administrator did not have the time or ability to answer questions and change limits and do those kind of things. I think ultimately it's the P card user who is not reaching out and doing that kind of initiation. With that being said, yes, if it went into my battery example, which I'm using because it's from the P card audit, yeah, there is difficulty. I know, there are busy times when, because that might turn into an RFP or some kind of other solicitation. And then, yeah, I could see that potentially would put a burden on that department. And they're more complicated. So the department who needs them and the user, you have to go through this entire process, set it up, monitor it, evaluate the respondents. It takes time versus I have a credit card in my pocket and I can go right down immediately to do that. That's I can understand where the time and energy is significant to be able to do that. So those types of things do happen, and I guess the administration just needs to determine if the current policies and procedures are sufficient, and we just are administering to that, or are there opportunities to make a change that makes it acceptable, or have the ability to follow the current Title VII policies to make sure that we're competitive bidding. On that particular example of the batteries, I do believe we're not getting the best deal if you're going and buying a battery at 1 or 2 at a time when you need 50 of them. I would imagine from a public interest standpoint that would be it would be probably less money if we followed the process, which I think is what we should always attempt to do.
Thank you, Mr. Thurn. I think we've beat this P card situation as far as we need to. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
There we go. Thank you, guys.